going on, guys? Welcome back. And today I'm going to be continuing my series of re-reviewing random MCU movies. The other day I did Iron Man, so today I'm going to be talking about Iron Man 2. Um, so, with Iron Man 2, this is one of the MCU movies where a majority of people don't like it. It's at the bottom of the majority of people's lists. And I've always had a soft spot for this film. I obviously never thought it was as good as the first film, but I always had a soft spot for it, and I still do. I still think it's a very good movie. I actually think it's a good movie, and I know a lot of people don't. But I'll explain why. And I have my fair share of problems with it, but I like all the characters. I really like Mickey Rourke as Whiplash, and they set up a lot of interesting ideas, which you wouldn't think about with the first one, like Tony having. There will be spoilers, of course. This movie came out like almost 10 years ago. So there will be spoilers, like next year it'll have come out 10 years ago. So it came out like 9 years ago. There will be spoilers. Um, but like, there's a lot of, I know the set for the background of this review is kind of lame, but I am working on a TV spot for Avengers Endgame right now, so I can't really build a lot of great backgrounds for these reviews. I just wanted to throw this together. The main content of the video isn't the display. The main content is the review, of course. But there are a lot of interesting concepts set up, which is like, you wouldn't think of Tony and having his heart or blood toxicity level, the arc reactor affecting his blood. Like that's interesting. And then having Ivan Vanko being this character where his father worked with Tony Stark, but he didn't get recognition for what he did. And in the end, he died, and Ivan has, taken up the role. He's going on to kill Tony Stark. There's a very, no pun intended, stark contrast between the characters. And that's an interesting concept, because there's a really interesting scene in a prison where Whiplash has just been taken to prison, and he's talking to Tony, and he's like, you don't realize how many people were affected by your company. It's really interesting, and it's something that you wouldn't think of. And some of those ideas aren't as well thought out and aren't as well developed as they are set up to be, but they are still very interesting. And this is just a quick note I wanted to talk about. I have a few notes written down for the movie. Something really quick I wanted to mention is in the opening credits it says the screenplay, if I'm not mistaken, was written by Justin Theroux, who voiced Garmadon in the Lego Ninjago movie. So just a quick little thing to throw out there. Might seem kind of random, but this channel is Lego, and I just thought that was kind of weird and kind of interesting. But and then another thing is Don Cheadle being cast as Rhodey. Now, I've heard a lot of people say they prefer Don Cheadle because he's obviously been the Rhodey in the majority of the MCU, and Terrence Howard played him in the first Iron Man, if you didn't know, and they recast him with Don Cheadle. I can't really say which one I like more. I think maybe Don Cheadle captures more of the caring guy. He seems like a very caring guy, and he tries to take care of Tony. But I think Terrence Howard got the camaraderie between the two of them down better. It's really weird. It's like they almost try to make his recast be like a big reveal in the movie. He's like with the government council or whatever, and they're like, I'd like to welcome Colonel James Rhodes, and then he walks in, and you just see like this back shot of him, like you just see like the behind of him, and then like it's like this big reveal up to his face, and it's like, oh my god, he has a different face. Like, I don't know, that's not a bad thing, but it's almost weird. Like they almost tried to play off his recasting as a big reveal, which I thought was kind of weird. But it's not a problem with the film at all. I just thought it was kind of interesting to bring up. And the weird thing about the movie it has a slightly different style of humor, which is kind of interesting. And it's kind of funny, but a lot of the humor is characters just talking, and then Tony Stark saying some quip, and they're just walking around talking, and they say some joke. And in the first half, I was like, Tony feels kind of weird. Like, he didn't do that much in the first one. Like, he did, but, like, he didn't do it that much. In this movie, he was almost too much for me in the first half, and he gets better as the film goes along. But it's really weird, and, yeah, it has a different sort of style of humor where people just walk around and like say some joke, and it is funny. A lot of it is actually funny. I just thought I'd bring that up. That the style of humor is kind of unique in this one, which is kind of interesting. there are a lot of weird moments as well in this movie, um, uh, like there's this really weird moment um, where like Iron Man's fighting Whiplash on the racetrack in the first half, and then he defeats him and he rips out like his arc reactor that he has in his weird little makeshift suit thing, and he just rips it out. And then like the second he does that, it has this like pan around shot of him lying on the ground, and then these SWAT team cops just run in and start picking him up, and it's like, were they just waiting off camera? Like the way they filmed it, it's like they were the those cast members are just waiting off screen, and then they just ran in. It's just really weird. Like the SWAT team were just waiting in the corner. I don't know. That just felt really weird to me. And there's a really weird moment with like James Rhodes, and this is another thing where I think Terrence Howard nailed the army man, or kind of, you know, like the soldier type role better than Don Cheadle, because no offense to Don Cheadle, I think he's a very good actor, but it's like the way that he doesn't really capture the soldier man kind of type. It's just like, I feel like Terrence Howard had that down more than Don Cheadle. He just doesn't really sell that. But there's this part where like the army general is like, okay, Rhodes, we're gonna do this meeting with Justin Hammer. And he's like, I don't think we should do that. And he's like, no, we need to do it. And he's like, okay, fine. And then the army general's like, good job, Rhodes. You've done good to your country. Salute. And it's like really weird because like he's like, good job doing service to your country, but like a minute ago I just told you like I forced you into doing this weapons manufacture meeting with Justin Hammer. But good job servicing your country by listening to what I forced you to do. Like, it's kind of weird. Um, so there's just some small weird moments like that I noticed on this rewatch. Um, and yeah, I just thought it was kind of weird. Um, as well. And I know it sounds like I'm ranting with this movie, but I actually really like this movie. Like I say, I like the humor, I like all the characters, and I really like the ideas that are at play, and I think it's very enjoyable to me, and I do actually really enjoy this film. I just want to talk about my issues with it, and acknowledge other issues that people have with it. Um, there are also some inconsistencies with like the Hammer tech, with Justin Hammer's tech. So at the end, they're fighting all the drones. Whiplash shows up, and then Rhodey's like, I'm gonna bust his bucket with the ex-wife or something. And then he's like, Tony's like, what? And then he shoots it, and it just hits the thing, and then it just drops in the water and fizzles out. And then he's like, Hammer tech? Yeah. So they make fun of Justin Hammer. It's like, the movie's almost kind of corny and cheesy at times. Like, there's this part where Whiplash is walking down the racetrack, and these cars crash, and there's like an explosion, and they play off Justin Hammer as this really idiotic guy. But, like, they did add all that tech to the War Machine suit, and all of it works. Like, the gun cannon, all of it. Like, he's, like, gives us a weapon manufacturer thing, and Rhodey's like, I'm gonna take it. Which one? All of it. And it's, like, really weird because, like, all the rest of it works fine, but then this one moment where they shoot the small one, they have to, like, make fun of him. I just find that really weird how it's, like, it's inconsistent. It's like, okay, he just took out all these other drones with, like, these machine guns. So clearly his tech isn't that bad and it works. But then, like, this one, like, I guess I'm trying to say, you know, Whiplash is better at making stuff than Hammer, but I don't know. It's just kind of a weird moment. Um, and it's kind of funny. It's another interesting thing that this is actually not a negative. It's a positive. And like I say, I really enjoy this film is where you see Tony and he's watching all these videos about his dad, all these like old videos that when like Nick Fury shows up and Nick Fury, man, he shows up so randomly in this movie. And so it's like Rhodey and Tony have this fight because Tony's getting drunk and he's having a party because he's worried it's like his last birthday party. So he's like he's drunk and he's having a party and he's getting a little bit too crazy. He's blowing stuff up. So Rhodey gets in a suit and it's like, but the way I would do is I would try to de-escalate it. If I was in that situation and my best friend was drunk, I wouldn't get in one of his suits and then go like, you don't deserve to wear that. Like, I would try and de-escalate it, but he just, like, goes straight in and they have a fight, and I don't know why. Like, they could have de-escalated that instead of turning it into a giant fight. That just struck me as a little weird. So they have their fight, and then it, like, cuts to black, and then it just, like, and then, like, another scene passes, and then Tony's sitting in this donut, and then they have to address the plot line of Tony's heart shrapnel, weird, blood toxin or whatever. So he meets up with Nick Fury at this cafe, and Nick Fury just shows up randomly, and he's like, "Hey, Tony!" And then they just go and, like, sit at this cafe, and he gives him, like, this thing, and he's like, "You need to go and worry about this plot line now." And then they're like, "Okay." And then, like, for, like, 30 minutes, Tony goes around, he's figuring stuff out, but he watches these videos from his dad, and then you meet Coulson, and he shows up, and then he's watching all these videos of his dad, and says, "My greatest creation is you," and it's very heartfelt, and I think very emotional. Um, and it's just it's very interesting because, like, you see in these old videos his father kind of goofing around, and it's like, Tony's father Howard was more like him than we thought, and I find that really interesting. Um, and I think that's a really interesting thing where they show that, like, they are actually more alike, but Tony still talks about how, "Oh, my father never told me he loved me, and he liked Steve Rogers," and I see a lot of people saying, "Oh, like, his father wanted to be like Steve Rogers, and he was just like Steve Rogers," and no, he's actually kind of more like Tony than we thought. He's not really just like Steve, and then you see that more in Captain America: The First Avenger, where Steve is talking to Howard because he obviously worked with Howard, and it's very interesting, that dynamic. And it's like Tony didn't know his father. He's like, "You clearly knew my father better than I did." He's like, "I did. He was one of the founding members of Shield." It's kind of interesting in that way. I'm sorry about my terrible Nick Fury impression, but it feels kind of weird because they're like, "Okay, we have to focus on this plot line about the blood thing." So it's like for 30 minutes they focus on Tony. He's going around and he goes to Pepper, and then they have a little thing, and she's like, "I'm allergic to strawberries," and it's really weird. I did love that weird Ferris wheel spinning thing, and he just, like, tries to stop it from spinning. And then he, like, opens this curtain, and then he walks back to it a minute later, and then there's just, like, this board, the board that his father had in his videos. And I understand that that's probably where it would be, because that is Stark Industries, but it's like the way that he just stumbles upon it is so convenient. And then he just drives around, and then he creates a new element, and Coulson shows up and has an old prototype cap shield. And then they use that, and then Tony creates the new element, and then, like, literally right after Tony creates the new element, it goes back to Whiplash, and you're like, "Oh yeah, Whiplash, Hammer, you were in this movie, I forgot." And then like immediately after, it's like Whiplash is like, "Hey Tony, we should do this," and it's kind of disappointing because they set up a really interesting dynamic between the two, but there's more chemistry almost between Tony and Hammer, and that's the unfortunate thing, is that Obadiah and Tony, Obi or whatever, the Jeff Bridges character in the first Iron Man, Tony and Obadiah, they had chemistry, and they set up these scenes where they set up a possibility for chemistry between Tony and Hammer and Tony and Whiplash. And granted, Tony has more chemistry with Hammer than he does with Whiplash, but it's really weird because, like, they set it up, and it's just like Tony has this one scene where he talks to Whiplash in jail. He gets out, and then he just sits around building stuff for, like, the whole movie, and then he just calls Tony. He's like, "Hey Tony, hey," and it's like they just had to focus on this one plot line, and then they're like, "Okay, we have to go back to Whiplash." I don't know. That's how I viewed it, and I viewed that kind of weird because it's like they set up really interesting dynamic with, people being harmed by Stark Industries and poor people, and how people not getting enough credit for the stuff they worked on. But then, like, it's just like there's no chemistry. He just shows up and they fight in the garden. It's like that's where you get some pretty fun action where Tony and Rhodey are fighting the drones, but that lasts for like a minute. There's a lot of cool different moves that they do. It's cool how oil splatters on Rhodey's helmet instead of blood, because they couldn't have blood because they're drones, but they're drones, so there's oil splatting on his helmet. That's cool. There's a lot of nice attention to detail in the film, which I appreciate. So that you get a lot of fun action there. But then once, like, Whiplash shows up, like, it's not a very good final battle. Like, the one with Jeff Bridges, Obadiah, felt like a pretty good final battle, but this one is just kind of like Whiplash shows up and they just, like, immediately blow him up. Like, that's kind of just what happens. It's kind of unfortunate because he's just kind of like a character where, you get a lot of time to develop that character, and you get a lot of time to develop him and Hammer, and Hammer's a funny character, and I like Whiplash. So I care about those characters. I care about them, but the send-off for him is just like he just blows up. It's like, okay, great. It's like, and there's no stakes. It's like, you lose, and then he just blows up all the drones, and he saves Pepper. But it's like, what about all the other people who were nearby the other drones that just blew up? Like, a lot of people died, but then in the end, they're just like, congratulations, you got a medal. And I apologize. I know it sounds like I'm ranting about this movie, but I really do like this movie. I'm just trying to say that, it isn't a flawless movie. It's not as good as Iron Man 1. I have to rewatch Iron Man 3, but I think it's probably better than that as well. And I think it's still one of the most underrated MCU movies. I still really enjoy it. And my mom, she's an MCU fan. She's watched all of them, and she says that this is like one of her, if not her favorite one. And I can understand. She explained to me why, and I understand it. And some of those elements are with Whiplash and Tony, but at the same time, I feel they didn't really give them enough time to develop those characters. So it's like they developed Tony, they developed Whiplash, but they never developed them together. They never developed those characters. They also play Black Widow into the story. They thread her in, and it's very interesting seeing Scarlett Johansson come in. It's like, and also Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury. He felt weird. Like his acting felt really weird. I don't know. But Clark Gregg as Coulson, when he showed up, it was really funny. I still love his line where he's like, "I could tase you, and I would watch Super Nanny while you drool in the carpet or whatever." Like, like that's really funny, and I always really liked that. Um, but I really like Iron Man 2. It's one of the most underrated MCU movies in my opinion. It's a lot better than quite a few of them, like Age of Ultron. I probably like it more than Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. Um, I probably like it more than Iron Man 3. It's not as good as the first Iron Man in my opinion, but I like I implore you, rewatch this movie and you'll probably like it more. And if you don't, that's fine. That's your opinion. But I find it really interesting how opinions vary on these. Because my mom, this is like one of, if not her favorite MCU film. It's like she thinks it's the best Iron Man one. She just really likes the Mickey Rourke Whiplash character. I totally understand that, and I find it really interesting how opinions vary on this film, but I really like it. I know I've discussed issues, but like I just wanted to share that I don't think it's a flawless movie, and I like to share my opinions as well on these films. So I'd probably give it like a B or a B plus, B minus, B or B plus. I can't really rate it, but yeah, you guys let me know what you think of Iron Man 2. I encourage you to rewatch it and revise your opinions. I really like it. I've discussed issues because I wrote some notes down while I was watching it, but I really like Iron Man 2. I think there's some great banter between the characters. I think it develops them a lot more. I think that a lot of these new characters are interesting, and there are some interesting story elements that are brought up, which aren't necessarily always ended in the best ways, but they are very interesting storytelling elements to bring into this universe. So good. You guys let me know what you think of Iron Man 2 if you've seen it and if you've rewatched it recently, and what you thought of my review as well. And I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.